Hey guys, it's Noah here, and today I'm going to be doing an unboxing, review, and demo of the Thrustmaster T16000M FCS HOTAS joystick and throttle combo. Optionally, you can also buy and use the rudder pedals. They do not come with this, and I don't think they're included in any Thrustmaster bundles, but if you own them already or are planning on buying them, they are compatible with this joystick. This joystick is a ambidextrous joystick, so you can use it with your left hand or your right hand, whereas the throttle is, you could possibly use it, I guess, as an ambidextrous throttle with your right hand, but to me it seems kind of awkward as it's more molded for left-handed use. But nonetheless, for right-handed people, this throttle and joystick are a very good combo for people starting out in flying games. But if you have more money to throw around and you have more experience with flying games, then I would recommend going for the Thrustmaster Warthog combo, which is basically this, but with more buttons, better build quality, and I think, in my opinion, it's more aesthetically pleasing as well. This port right here on the throttle is where you plug in the pedals, if you have them, so you can control the rudder. But you don't need them to play any games. In fact, you can play games with just the joystick, and some games will only allow single input for a controller. Games such as Battlefield 4 will only allow one controller to be plugged in, meaning you can't have both of these running in the same game, so you can't use both of them to control the game. But you can use the joystick to control the game, which is actually fine because the joystick has its own slider that you can use to act as a throttle. So games that don't support dual controller input you can just use the joystick itself. There is a tightening screw that I'm pointing to right there, and that's what you use to make the throttle easier to push up or harder to push up, depending on how you like it. And it's nice to see that each one has its own USB cable. That way they don't have to be closer together like the HOTAS X that Thrustmaster also sells. That would obviously give a limited range with where you can put them because they are tied together. And they are very nice, nicely built joystick and throttle, and I got them on a steal on Amazon, about $30 off the list price. And they have tons of buttons, plenty of things to map things to. Has two 8-way hats with both controllers combined. I believe 2 4-way hats. And a ton of buttons, 28 I think. There's at least 12 on the base of the joystick. There's 3 on the top, and then there's the trigger. You also have the slider, and then the 8-way hat I mentioned before. And on the throttle, you have the 8-way hat, 2 4-way hats, 3 stationary buttons, 1 button rocker that has like 2 buttons if you push it up, and then like one button if you push it up, and then 1 button if you push it down, but total it has 2 buttons. It has a joystick, so you can actually like look around in the cockpit with throttle. And it also has a paddle that acts as an axis, so you can map that to an axis if you want to control the rudders or something like that from the throttle. A zoom knob, which is actually really nice to see if you want to zoom in when you're in a game. And finally, obviously, the thruster itself that you push forward and backward. So obviously plenty of buttons to map. And I had no problem mapping all of the buttons to games like Arma 2 that allow dual controller input. And the ambidextrous thing I mentioned before, you can just pop off the grip on one side and then unscrew the thumb rest on the other side, and then use the other copy it comes with, so you can use the joystick with your left hand. So it's very nice to see that Thrustmaster is thinking of everybody when they made this joystick. And it is actually a perfect starter joystick for beginners who are just starting out in flying games. And it will fare beginners pretty well. It is very nice, and it works very well in games. And I would highly recommend it for a good starter joystick if you've never used one before. Up next, I will be doing a demo in-game and showing you how the joystick works. The test of the flight stick and the throttle. First thing what you're going to want to do to make sure that your flight stick and throttle are properly registered on your computer is search for this. Set up USB game controllers. It's under the control panel. I just searched for it because I didn't know exactly where it was. but you're going to want to pull that up, and right here you can see that it has both the T1600M, or T16000M, sorry, and the TWCS throttle. So that's what the two controllers are called, or what the computer recognizes them as, I should say. And basically, you can, from within this, you can test all of the functions of each controller. Like right now, I can go around and press all of the buttons on the throttle. It counts the 4-way hats as buttons on the throttle, whereas the 8-way hat, it has its own special point of view hat, and you can see that being controlled right there. The joystick is controlled right here. The thumbstick, I should say, that's on the throttle. Thumbstick's actually very nice. If you're inside a cockpit, you can use that to look around, which is pretty cool. And it counts the two paddles as an axis, a Z-axis in fact. You can see me moving. These are the paddles right here. And then the zoom knob, it counts as a dial. And of course the sliding of the throttle itself, like sliding the throttle back and forth, it counts that as a Z-axis. So I meant to say the other one, the paddles, that counts as a Z rotation, which is kind of weird. But I don't know. I don't know. It's just the way the computer registers it, I guess. But you can control everything from the joystick on here and see what you're pressing and test all of the buttons. And in fact, you can go to the properties and calibrate it, or you can reset it to the default calibration. I did have to calibrate mine a little bit when I first got it. It didn't quite register everything as center, so I just fixed it myself. You can do the same thing for the throttle, or the joystick itself, I should say. And you can see me moving the joystick. This is me moving it around just around, like back and forth and left and right. And you can see the Z-axis rotation has its own little thing right here, so you can see when I'm turning that. And the slider on the bottom is its own little axis too. You can see me moving that up and down. It has another 8-way hat, and you can see that being controlled right here. It's a little bit hard to reach some of them, so I just mapped my 8-way hat just using the 4 main ones, up, down, left, and right, so you can go like that. And then each of the buttons is registered on there too. It registers the trigger as of the first button, and then the one below the hat, second one, third one, fourth one, and then there's 12 buttons on the bottom of the base of the stick. You can see me press those in a row, where it kind of skips around. They're kind of put in a weird order, actually, when you think about it. I don't know why it's in the order that it is. Basically, if you go to the first row of buttons farthest away from the stick on the left, that first button is number 5, and it goes 6 to the right, 7 to the right, then 8 down, 9 left, 10 left. Then if you go to the other side of the flight stick, you have 11 on the far right at the top right, and then you have 12 to the left of that, 13 to the left of that, 14 below that, 15 to the right of that, and 16 to the right of that. So it doesn't really make that much sense to me, but that's just the way the computer registers it, and you can map them to anything you want in the game that you use. I would like to mention that the Thrustmaster target software is not necessary to be able to use these. These work right out of the box. Basically, the computer recognizes them as a controller the same way it would recognize an Xbox controller as a controller. So it thinks of these as two different controllers, right? So when you play certain games that don't allow dual controller input, such as say Battlefield 4, it will only register one of the controllers at once. So you can either use the joystick or the throttle, but you can't use both at the same time in that game, because it's thinking that you're like trying to it'd be like trying to plug in two Xbox controllers or two PS4 controllers, and it thinks that you're crazy for trying to use two PS4 controllers to control your character at once. So it will only let you use one. Whereas more advanced programs such as flight simulators and Arma 2, for example, which I will open up in a second and show you a tour around that, they allow for dual controller input, and it understands that these are flight stick controls and not just basic controllers, whereas Battlefield 4 is not able to distinguish the difference between an Xbox controller and a flight stick controller doesn't really know the difference. It just thinks of both as a Xbox controller because it doesn't expect you to be using a flight stick. Since the throttle has, or sorry, not the throttle, the joystick has a slider on it, you can use the slider as the throttle rather than using the throttle itself. So in Battlefield 4, you can just keep one finger on the slider and use that for your throttle instead of having the keyboard that you'd use as your throttle, because I think it's better to have a slider than just to press keys to try and get your thrust to go up and down. But that's just my opinion. There's a ton of buttons on the joystick itself for you to be able to use it just with the joystick in a game, so you won't be at a loss if you're not able to use both the joystick and the throttle at the same time. I'm not very good at Arma 2, so please do not judge me. I did not really practice with the flight stick all that much in Arma 2, so I might crash. Don't judge me if I do. And there is a ton of controls in Arma 2, and you can see that I have all of them mapped to what I like with the throttle. And you can, with Arma, the cool thing about Arma 2 and other advanced games is you can map everything. You can map the buttons, you can map the axes, you can map the key presses. So Arma has a ton of things that you can map to, almost overwhelming the amount of things that it has that you can map. And some of them I don't have mapped because I don't use them or don't care for them as much as the game wants me to. But I will just be using the controls I have set up now, and I'll just scroll down really slowly. So if you're interested in using these controls for your game, you can see what they are in here, and you can just kind of figure out what moves what through trial and error. Like, you press a button, it'll say what control that is, and then you can press it again and it'll get rid of that control, so you don't just have a ton of controls crowding up because you have to hit delete after each control you set. So yeah, here's all the controls, and pause the video if you want to change your aircraft controls to mine. And like I said again, please don't judge me. I'm not the best at this game. So let's see how this goes. I'm going to try not to crash.